Am I the asshole for firing my nanny after she didn't correct people who thought she was my child's mother? I, 35F, am Asian American, and my significant other, 38M, is white. Our child, too, ended up getting all of my significant other's recessive genes and looks almost entirely white. This is a rather sore point for me since I often get mistaken for the babysitter. We have a nanny, Mary, 25F, who coincidentally has the same color hair and eyes as my child. Very light, golden brown hair and greenish hazel eyes. Mary is great with my child and she seems to genuinely care about them. I work unusual and long hours, emergency physician, so I don't really see my neighbors very frequently. Today, I happened to have a day off and ran into my neighbor while walking with my child. The neighbor said hi to my child and asked if I was the new nanny. I said no, I'm her mom. The neighbor seemed very confused and said that she had been under the impression that Mary was the mom. At first, I was annoyed, but assumed it was an honest mistake. A lot of people think this when they see them together because of their similar coloring. However, my neighbor then told me that Mary was telling people she was the mom and that she had clearly heard my child refer to Mary as mama. I confronted Mary about this the next time she was over, and she basically brushed it off and said she didn't actually tell people that. She just didn't correct their assumptions. I then asked about my child calling her mama, and Mary told me it's short for Mary. Her name isn't actually Mary, by the way, but it's a name that starts with Ma, also. I was really angry at that point and told her she was fired. She got very upset and started crying, saying she needed the money, that she loved my child, and that this was incredibly unfair. I stood my ground and she finally left. I ended up leaving my child with my mom so I could go to work. My husband came home later and got angry with me for firing Mary without consulting him and for not having any backup plan for childcare. We are now scrambling to find daycare or a nanny ASAP, and my mom has to watch my child in the interim. My husband thinks I overreacted and that I'm just sensitive to this issue because our child doesn't look like me. I do kind of feel like a jerk now because our childcare situation is a mess and Mary is out of work with no notice. But at the same time, it feels really sketchy to me that someone is masquerading as my child's mother. Edit. I want to clarify that my sensitivity doesn't stem from the fact that my child doesn't look like me physically, but the radical undertones that come with the automatic assumption that I, a POC, must be the babysitter. Most white adoptive parents are not mistaken for a babysitter while out with their POC children, but almost all POC parents of white passing children are assumed to be a babysitter, rather than either the adoptive or bio parent. I am bothered by the inherent racism in the fact that the vast majority of people assume that I must be a babysitter despite the fact that my child is clearly treating me as a mom. Another edit because I want to defend my poor husband, just in case he stumbles upon this post. There is virtually no chance he is messing around with Mary. He also works long hours and barely has any interaction with her. I doubt he even knows her full name. The idea that they would be getting together behind my back actually made me laugh. He's, probably justifiably, more upset about having to find last minute childcare, and he's not actually defending Mary. Commenter 1. Not the asshole. The fact that your neighbor initiated a conversation with your child is a very good sign that they know your kid, meaning they've probably had multiple conversations with your former nanny. She didn't just brush it off as a conversation with a stranger. She deliberately, according to her version of events, misled this person into believing she was the mother. Even her defense of simply not correcting them doesn't make any sense. There would be zero reason not to say you're the nanny. In fact, that even gives you an out to leave an uncomfortable situation. I need to get them to a playdate slash home to their parents slash other activity. Further, the neighbor has no reason to lie about overhearing her say this to multiple people. That is extremely odd behavior on the part of the nanny. Beyond contributing to a misguided perception of you among your neighbors and being potentially confusing to your child, her actions demonstrate a lack of emotional stability and good judgment. I wouldn't feel comfortable leaving my hypothetical child in her care. Best case is that she's young and stupidly wanted to cosplay being a wealthy stay at home mother without considering how that would affect your family. You say she's otherwise a really good nanny, but that's a big red flag. Her motives aren't entirely clear, but she's definitely acting in her own best interests, not those of the child. The fact that her argument against being fired was that she loved your child is sort of the point. She does not seem capable of respecting appropriate boundaries. Unrelated to my ruling, I would be curious if your nanny ever came on to your husband. OP. I think out of every possible scenario, the most likely one is that she enjoys pretending to be a stay-at-home mom with the wife of a wealthy doctor. The joke's on her though, because my husband and I owe a combined $400,000 in med school debt, and the vast majority of our salaries go straight to student loans. It could be very easy to fall in love with this child, especially for Mary, who seems, she's 25, she's young, right? And she looks exactly like your child's mom. Why wouldn't she want to cosplay as the mom of this child with seemingly no repercussions as long as you don't find out, right? And I kind of think it's like one of those things where people She's like in love with your child, but she doesn't love your child like a mom would, if that makes any sense. Like, you see a dog and you're like, "Oh, it's a puppy. Oh, it's so cute." And then you see your dog, and of course you think the same thing about your dog, but you don't really treat it the same way you would someone else's dog, if that makes any sense. I think that's kind of the situation here. And it's definitely not a good thing either because the child doesn't know any better, right? Anyways, let's get right into the update. Update. Same post slash next day. I wasn't expecting to get this many responses. Thank you for taking time to respond. I noticed a lot of dismissive attitudes from non-person of colors in the comments. This is the very same attitude that caused me to become angry with Mary. She downplayed my very real reason for being upset and additionally implied that my child just looked white. Part of being a good nanny for a biracial child is to help the child understand and be proud of their heritage. This post made me reflect on why I became so upset with Mary and realized that I had excused many microaggressions by Mary because of her youth and her otherwise good relationship with my child. For example, Mary only ever gave my child the lighter skinned dolls, despite us having dolls of all skin tones. Mary joked about how much safer our neighborhood was than hers, and Mary never gave my child Asian food, even though I would leave a lot in the fridge and encourage her to heat it up, etc. Maybe some of you will not understand the significance of such microaggressions, but these sort of subtle actions shape the mindset of young children. That being said, I do sympathize with Mary's financial situation, so I will offer her some severance pay. Wow, that is not the direction I expected this to go in. You know, before the first update, I kind of felt bad for Mary that she was just going to get fired without any say in it. But even though, I mean, that doesn't mean I'm like justifying her actions. I still don't think what she did was right in the first post. But now in the update, I don't feel bad at all because you should not be raising a kid by hinting at them subtle racism. Like that's not okay. That's not how you should want to raise a child, even if it's not your child. You shouldn't raise any child that way. Period. Especially nowadays where the world feels so like divided and stuff on all these kind of issues, and it's important for kids to grow up with a very well-rounded and neutral opinion on things. And if Mary continued to be your nanny, then that's not how your child would have grown up. Anyways, that's gonna do it for this story. Let me know what you all think in the comments down below, and I'll see you all in the next one.